we're going to switch to a topic that is especially near and dear to my heart. Now we're going to talk about building a coalition for open source and cooperative medicine. This is the Open Insulin Project, which I have been with since it started. It's something that is really important to me. I think is really important precedent to set for the world. And Anthony, who was supposed to present on it, is unfortunately not here. So we're not going to ad lib exactly, but we're going to see how we're going to do this. We've got a lot of the Open Insulin team here. I'm just double checking that we've got them all as co-hosts. That means you guys can unmute yourselves. You can screen share. So Louise, Jessica, Lance, do we want to introduce ourselves? And then go on with how we're going to run this? That sound good? All right. Well, you guys know who I am. No introduction for me. Louise, can you introduce yourself and tell us who you are with the project?
Hi, everyone. My name is Louise Lassalle. I'm with the Open Insulin Project. I'm leading the communication effort. And so today we wanted to do a more interactive session. So we will ask you questions and see and get your feedback. We will be talking a little about the Open Insulin Project, but also what kind of other projects are out there that we could use the same kind of tools that we are using with Open Insulin and share like our analysis of that we get through with the Open Insulin Project. So.
Yeah, and Louise, so where are you and where are you located? What do you do? What's your background?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm in Baltimore, Maryland. I'm working with as a staff in the university. I have a background in biochemistry.
Yep. Lance, do you want to introduce yourself and what you do with the project?
Sounds good. I'm Lance. Been with the project for a little under a year now. My background is in investing and business. And I help with the project on the business side, as well as a bit on the regulatory side. And I'm based in San Francisco, California.
Yep. And Jessica, if you can go next.
Hi, I'm Jessica. I have also been with the project about the same time as Lance. I started, I think, last November or December. I have a background in engineering microbes to make small molecules for biotech, but I actually now work for MIT, so I'm actually automatically able to share my screen and unmute myself for everything. That's my superpower. But I was started off working in the lab for Open Insulin, but transitioned with everyone working remotely to sort of heading up our regulatory group, which is a great plug for everyone can do everything, because I have absolutely no background in regulatory. And so it's been a fun learning experience, and we've been lucky enough lately to have a bunch of people who actually do know stuff come in our door, but that's sort of very surreptitious. I helped run the intern program that Maria put together over the summer, as did Lance and Louise. So yeah, it's been a fun experience.
And I, like they said, helped put together an intern program and just kind of hang out and cheerlead the Open Insulin team and help where I can. So an overview of the project. Do we have an overview of Open Insulin, Louise?
Yeah, right. I'm sharing my screen now. I think Nicole is there too. I don't know, Nicole, you want to, I think I saw you.
Yeah, if Nicole is here, if we can make her a co-host too. I thought I had missed someone.
Oh, it's okay, just if you want to introduce herself.
Actually, I don't see Nicole. Or there she is.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hey, I'm Nicole Foti. I've worked with Open Insulin for about 2.5 years. I'm a PhD student at the University of San Francisco, or University of California, San Francisco, and I've helped out with the policy and legal aspects of the project.
Great.
Okay, so as I mentioned before, today's session, we wanted to have an interactive session. So we will present a little what we have done, but it will be just a very short part of the Open Insulin project. We will focus on governance. So of course, I will be sharing the link to register for our monthly info session if you want to learn more about the overall project, what we do, and if you are interested in getting involved. So before I talk a little more about the Open Insulin project, I I want you to think about, so it can be a problem in your community, it can be also something that you have to deal with, it can be health, sociological, ecological, that you think can be addressed by biohacking. And I want to think about topic that you're like, it could have been done better. One great example I have in mind is women contraception. And women, women contraception in general, is like, it's working, but you know, or you have to take a pill every day. I mean, it's not very patient friendly. So and there's a lot of very huge side effect and all of this. And so you can think a lot of this that, yeah, you know, they do what it's supposed to do, but it could be better. And sometimes, you know, that is not around technology, is more around how much people spend and how much funding is dedicated to this kind of area of research or things like that. And when you think about why it wasn't doing right, try to think about why is that? So in general, people, you know, so sometimes people are incompetent. Sometimes they just don't know, like they never ask, actually. Like the people, when they decide on this medical device, or when they decide of this rule, like the people actually concerned with that, were not in the room to start with, and no one thought about asking them what they need. So this is a lot of things that we have been thinking a lot with open insulin, who need to be in the room, who need to decide on stuff. And then, of course, the last question, but I think you will see me coming with that, is do you think that the issue of medicine affordability, especially in the US, can be solved by biohackers? So please share any thought you have on the chat. Let me see if I can, I don't need to see myself. Yeah, please share down the chat if you want to. So if you think about stuff, if you have more ideas, you can drop them now in the chat. So just to get the conversation going, I will start talking a little about open insulin. But if you have more ideas coming up, and it can be, you know, even if you're not completely sure that it can be addressed by biohacking, you know, we can have a discussion around that. Okay. So talking about open insulin. Open insulin want to address the insulin crisis that impacts people with diabetes. So people with diabetes need insulin, type 1.
Are the slides advancing for everyone else? I only see the title slide. Is that true for everyone?
I just see the title slide too, Louise.
Let me share again. Oh, you can see, okay, so you can see that.
So you might want to, if you unshare and then reshare, you can pick which window you want to be shared.
I thought sometimes they did it when okay. So you didn't see this one?
No,
okay.
But now we can just see the slide, so it's working.
Okay. So that was the question, if you like we will be talking about. Okay, so I will move to open insulin. So the goal with open insulin is to tackle the insulin crisis in the US, but worldwide. Is a huge problem that is a mix of different issues, insulin affordability, insulin access, and sometimes a mix of both of them, and also awareness, how people can know they are diabetic or not, how they can be correctly have access to correct healthcare and all of that. One thing that we really want to address with the Open Insulin Project is a price of insulin, especially in the US. So the 90s, like the late 90s, beginning of 2000 was the beginning of what we call insulin analogues, that are modified human insulin that really bring a very a better quality of life for people with diabetes. And they were sold in the US for $40, a little more in the 2000, and now they can reach like 300 or even more list price. The manufacturing cost for one vial is around $5. So you can see the huge difference between what it costs for the pharma to produce it and how much they sell it. So they're doing a huge profit, and you can check their financial statement around that. In general, so I will go to that. Yeah, okay. And for more, so there's new insulin analog coming up, but for example, Lantus, that has been around since the 2000, was approved in the US. I think it's 2003. The price have skyrocketed too, and it has been around for more than 20 years. So who is making and selling insulin? Basically 3 big pharma, so Eli Lilly, Sanofi, Novo Nordisk. If you have more questions about this big pharma, they share the market, feel free to ask. But basically, yeah, for all of them, I actually check. Insulin analog is in general their top rated, like where they make the more profits, the more revenue. This is all their portfolio they have. Like insulin is really like where you want to make revenue. So what we do, so of course, the problem with this very high prices is people don't have access to it. 1 out of 4 people with diabetes in the US have to ration their insulin at some point in their life, or even sometime in the last year. So what we do at Open Insulin, I would say what we do the same. So what we try is to replicate what is done by manufacturer and produce insulin using microorganisms. So you modify them, and they will produce insulin. So you can see here when we work at the lab. So we have a wet lab now in Oakland, in Oakland and in Santa Clara in California, and one in Baltimore here in Maryland. So the technique we use, the processes, same. We are not, basically we are based on off-patent processes and the molecule we want to produce, and or published patents. So really like no innovation. We may do innovation without knowing it perhaps, but it's basically just reproducing stuff that have been done before. Where we want to actually innovate is the way that the insulin will be produced, and we want to set up cooperative. We share governance between the workers, so that's how in general cooperative operates. But we want to add another stakeholders, that's people with diabetes. So the people producing the medicine and the people using the medicine. And in this way, we remove profit because we don't have shareholders. So you can sell an insulin that is affordable, and just making sure that the business is sustainable. So you pay whatever like your expenses, and that's it. So that's what we aim for. And hopefully this will, so of course one big thing we want to address is the price of insulin, but one thing we also have in mind is to, since the people with diabetes will be in the governance, what we were thinking of is they will also have their say about like they will be able to see everything, to decide how it's produced, what is quality analysis, what kind of insulin is produced, depending on what they need. Do they need to produce, to have vial? Do they need to have pen? Even we can think about doing perhaps innovation around like the medical device for people with diabetes. So that's what's that's why we have that's what we are doing, like kind of new, is to put the people we want to serve and are the first to use the first user in the center of the governance since the beginning. Just to give you another example, and is still in the diabetic community. A few years back, some hackers developed a software to connect a glucose sensor and an insulin pump, so they can interact and talk with each other. These have not yet, I think, a commercial equivalent, or at least not at this level of what it do. It's very reliable system. And what was, because it's open source, and it's also something that we are really, is very important for us, because when you share your knowledge, when you share what you are doing, how you are doing it, you can improve your whatever is your product much more. So that's what's the case. So there was different version. They make different addition, and also people can buy in because they can see the programs, they can see how it works. There's nothing hidden. It's not a black box. So people, because they have to trust them with their life. Like this is super important. Like if you don't get insulin, you are in big trouble. So here open source was also a big thing. First, to have very efficient software. So no commercial equivalent yet, and they are trying, but they cannot. And also to so very high quality product. And also you have a lot of buy-in from the community. So that's why I have, I don't know, I think people share the slides. So I was thinking, I don't know how this will work, but if people have ideas on projects they think that biohackers should be taking on, and that doesn't mean you will have to do it, it's just, you know, to share, see what kind of idea can come up with this discussion. So let's just share. So I think if you click to be able to actually write on it. So I don't know if that, so we can just keep this going for now. And I will let my team member, if you want to add some stuff. I was not able to really look at the chat. So if there's a question you want to address to, I will let you take on.
So I don't think there were any, the two questions that showed up in the chat were about how to join the team. You can go to our website. We also, Louise and Maria host a monthly new member onboarding meeting, which is, when's the next date for that, Louise or Maria?
It's October 25th. And I will share a link. So you can sign up for this one. And if you cannot make it for this one, there's the same link you will be able to sign up for November or December.
Yeah, but you don't have to attend that before you can come join us and talk, but that's just a good overview of the project and sort of where we're going with all that. And then the other question was about the slides, which we've shared with you. So if you have anything you'd like us to talk more about, I'm happy to talk a little bit about our regulatory strategy, or we can talk more about the governance. Let us know what's of interest to you guys.
Yeah, I think one of the big things is we've always wanted to inspire other people and set a precedence for a safe, effective way to create these open source medicines. So we want to get people thinking about how can this happen right now with the regulatory questions. You know, I think we've spent a lot of time thinking about not only can we make insulin, but how do we deliver it to the public? That has been our latest hurdle of what does the FDA pathway actually look like for biologics? And what does it actually take? How much money? So we've been recently working on a grant application for Baltimore to try to actually start up a production facility. So instead of taking this out of the community lab and take this into actual production to bring it to patients. And the price point's much lower than you would think for insulin. So we were thinking tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to really get to end product eventually. And it could be possible to potentially get a small scale production facility going for, what are we thinking, Lance, before I throw out numbers that I'm making up? And I will make up numbers.
So in terms of both going through regulatory path and starting up facilities, we're looking on the order of, you know, low single digit millions versus using old pathways and approaches. It was closer to hundreds of millions of dollars to manage the process end to end. So pretty meaningful reduction in cost. A large part of that is there have been recent updates, which if anyone's interested, Jess can dive into deeper, but there have been recent updates in approval pathway by the FDA, which is essentially for well-characterized drugs like insulin have a much more expedited pathway that requires a lot less clinical human testing, and that significantly reduces the timeline to get an insulin biosimilar to market, and it also significantly reduces the price.
Yeah. And, you know, one of the goals is to do this in the US first, but then find global partners to work with. I think, you know, this is in global collaborations because that's what we're looking like. And this project has always had global partnerships. You know, we've worked with Mamboa Lab in Cameroon. The biggest problems they've had is that they can't get anything in country. So they're kind of taking that stepping stone with Jenny Malloy's group to start to figure out what reagents can they make in country to actually get them to the point where they can do some basic experiments and things necessary to get a synthetic biology lab up and running efficiently to then be able to take the next step towards things like insulin production, et cetera. But yeah, so we do have folks that we've partnered with. We have a group in Brazil, Eduardo's group in Brazil. We applied for a joint grant with them so that his group can look at starting up a branch of the project in Brazil that's funded. We've partnered for a long time with Australia, and we have project members from all over the world. So there's no limit. In fact, 2 of our fellows, of the 20 fellows this summer, one was from Greece and one was from Cameroon. So assuming we're going to do another intern program, which I think I'm up for, and we'll see if the mentors will do another round. It'll be in the spring or summer. That'll be open up for your communities to have people participate in. But what questions do you guys have? I mean, does anybody have an interest in seeing decentralized drug production? This is, you know, something I think is important. With COVID, we're seeing supply lines that are challenged. I think with climate change, we're going to continue to see supply lines challenged. I think with destabilized governments, we're going to see supply lines challenged. And so anything we can produce in country, open source, and enable people to make the things that they need for their communities is going to be important. And pharma has not wanted that. So there is not a big precedent for this in the pharma world. So we really need to set the precedent and figure out how to do it, because it's not hard. Question for the audience, not on the Open Insulin team. When was insulin first synthesized? How long has this problem been solved? So put it in the chat if you happen to know what year insulin was first synthesized. We'll turn this into a trivia since you guys are being quiet on me.
Yeah, and just to follow up on Maria's point about supply chains, one of the things I do for MIT is we're hosting a webinar next week. It's unfortunately closed to members only of the community, but it's on supply chain disruptions during COVID, and the FDA lists 120 different medicines that are in current shortage right now due to this problem. So it is a real problem. And only a couple of them are actually critical because there are backups for most of them. So fortunately, it's not a real problem yet, but it's likely as this continues on.
Yeah. But what questions do you guys have? You were the quietest crowd I have had all weekend. We must have blown your brains because you have had too much BioSummit. So I know I see Anders sitting there like nodding along. Do you have some questions for us, Anders? This is what happens when I MC. I don't wait for the audience to ask questions. I make you start asking questions.
No, I was taking notes the whole time, so it's been really interesting to learn about this and to have to sort of translate it into this form. But I had some immediate sort of thoughts about parallels and ideas just sort of surrounding like translating this process into other sort of disciplines and realms. And the first ones that came to mind were like COVID-19, et cetera. But as somebody that's queer and non-binary, there's a huge world of trans identifying folks that have to deal with managing gender reassignment sort of processes in the medical industrial complex and dealing with access to medicine, getting approval. And I know that's already a world that has a huge component of DIY and doing like mutual aid systems, things like that. And so it's already a world that I think like, you know, it'd be interesting to see a more formal conversation with those communities in right relationship and like sort of taking ideas from that community and how they navigate through that system. But
yeah, I you know, big snaps up about that. I think that that is exactly what we want to see is, you know, where are needs not being met? Because right now, where are needs being met? The needs are being met by what the market is following, and pharma is following where they can make the most money. Insulin's a really one of the worst examples of that because, you know, even at making a huge profit, they should be charging about $22 a vial. And that would be huge profits for them. But instead, you know, it's hundreds of dollars a vial because they are vile people in how much they charge for a vial. It's Sunday. I get to do bad puns today.
Yeah,
I really like.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I really like that your thoughts on that, because insulin also has this informal network of people trading supplies and test strips and insulin as well. And so I think there probably is a lot of parallels between the communities that would be really interesting to explore and see what learnings from one can do for the other and to help sort of cross-pollinate those ideas. So yeah, it's a great thoughts.
Yeah, we've actually even looked at how cannabis co-ops are formed, because I think that's one of the few precedences we have seen for something like we're looking at, which is a co-op pharmaceutical model, where the co-op owns the pharmaceutical producer. And again, there's no precedent when you look in biotech. I think the closest I can find when I really stretched myself is either the farm co-ops, you know, like Ocean Spray, or the cannabis co-ops, etc. So we have a lot of rethinking to do. I will ask Lance, since he's on the call, you know, as a business person, what do you think is one of our biggest challenges with models like this? Because it's not the science. We figured out kind of a regulatory path that just takes some funding. On the business side, what do you think are challenges for anyone who wants to recreate doing something like this?
I'd say a lot of the challenges, even though there's a theoretical regulatory path, a lot of it will come down to execution, particularly when it comes to safety and finding partners who are, at least at the beginning, willing to partner with an unconventional organization that is taking a more decentralized approach. And I think that's for the first few decentralized facilities that come online. Because in medicine production, there's a very traditional model where, you know, pharma and biotech startups will invest hundreds of millions of dollars, raise huge amounts of venture capital for drugs that have very fat margins. Most of those drugs will fail because they are either not safe or not effective. The ones that do make it through, they then charge, again, that huge margin because they need to recoup their costs for all the drugs that failed in their pipeline. And so in this model, it only supports venture capital funded huge biotech companies. And there's you know, no room for a low cost structure. So the entire point of our project is to break this model, particularly for well-characterized, you know, safe drugs that can be produced in a decentralized fashion and therefore should be low cost production. So it's really, we have the theoretical pathway. The biggest challenge is just going to actually convince partners to give the small amount of funding needed to scale up. And really, I think the biggest challenge will be to convince some of the contract manufacturing organizations to partner, to essentially take that leap of faith initially, partner with us. And then once it's a proven model and it's safe, secure, and actually accomplishes our goals and gets positive PR, then I think the pathway becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, I think that that's absolutely right. To switch gears a little bit, Nicole, you're with a subgroup of the project, which is very unusual for any project like this, which is Science and Society. It's a bunch of social scientists that are really thinking about what are the social implications of a project like this? How do people interact with this project, looking at this project? Combination of, you know, philosophers, anthropologists, sociologists, geographers, pretty wacky group. What do you think for global collaborations makes you, Open Insulin unique, that made you want to kind of study it? And do you think like other groups could learn about the way we interconnect globally?
Let's see. So I guess, one thing that's really unique about open insulin, and I heard this at another panel, I think yesterday, is that it kind of intersects a lot of different areas, right? It's kind of getting at kind of like an anti-capitalist perspective or anti-biocapital that was brought up in a meeting, in the last few months. This decentralized model of drug production reminds me a lot of Manu's talk about transfer of ownership. I found that really kind of interesting, and a lot of it felt relatable to what I've heard from the Open Insulin Project and the decentralized model, and trying to make it so that people have, are autonomous in their ability to make insulin in different locations based on different contexts. So I think, it is an interesting group to have, the Open Insulin in Society working group, kind of a group of sociologists, anthropologists, as well as people from all different types of disciplines thinking about what is open insulin's role as in society, and thinking about it from that perspective. Yeah.
Any grand, so not just thinking about it, but I mean, what do you think about, our role? If you have like a minute or two to think about what you would say about our role in society as, one of those folks watching us.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my immediate reaction is to Open Insulin has these really incredible ideas, but has to operate in this really intense system full of regulations, full of enormous capital amongst pharmaceutical companies. I think the realities of the challenges that they're up against are kind of in conversation all the time in the meetings. And so I think it's absolutely incredible, what's happening. And I think the ability to coalesce a group like this to continue to fight against these enormous, these huge barriers, but that's so important to fight against, is really inspiring and really, really great.
Yeah, one thing I would give any other group that wants to do things like this is, when we started, when Anthony first started this, the biggest thing we did is we just never gave up on the idea, no matter how crazy or outside the possibility of actually getting it to patient seemed. And working a lot on the communications aspect has been super important. Louise and the communications team is great. We've been really fortunate that we've gotten an enormous amount of good press on the project. So we've gotten some of the more high profile press you can get out there. We got a 6-page spread in Time magazine. We've been featured by the Wall Street Journal and so many places. I don't think I can go anywhere these days without folks knowing about the project in a positive light, which is both exciting and kind of frightening because it puts a lot of responsibility on us. But we do want to set that good precedent for folks who want to do that. So again, you guys are super quiet. Who has something that they wish that they would want to see produced in this manner? Because that's what we want to hear, is who else would want to do something like this? I'm not saying you have to, but what do you want to see produced the same way we want to see insulin produced? Anders gave us, one idea that we hadn't thought of. Anders, did you have something else?
I have a quick question, if it's possible
Yeah.
to ask that. I'm curious to know what it actually looks like sort of for labs to partner with the organization and this movement, and what the actual sort of lab work entails for partnering community labs. I'm not personally a part of a community lab, but sort of interesting to have this conversation because I work in a biomedical research lab. So I'm like on like the far dark sort of evil side of this thing. So it's interesting to see just how much.
It's okay. We all come from somewhere.
Yeah. But,
lots of us are part of that world. Louise, why don't you take the partnering side?
Yeah, sure. I can then let Jess, she's more connected with the wet lab stuff, but I think what's happened is a lot of knowing. So you were talking about how we build partnership. I mean, the short answer is just we know people, and it's building relationship with each other. So the project started at CCL, at Counterculture Lab in Auckland. And of course, Maria leading the effort in Biocultures in Santa Clara. And then what happened is one of our main scientists moved to Baltimore. So and we happen to be a community lab in Baltimore too. That is exceptional bugs. So and we just we have a meeting with them. Say, look, this is a project. What do you think? Can we work there? And of course, I mean they were on board. And I think it's related to Maria's points in general. When we ask, people are really on board, especially on the community lab. With COVID, I think it's difficult to start new project. We have been in contact in Seattle with Sound. What's the name in Seattle community?
Sound Bio.
Yeah. And then it's a lot depending of if we can find people in this community lab that will like to work on the project. And I think we can mentor from, it helps a little if these people have an idea a little of biochemistry, but that's not like a requirement, and there's a lot of things to work on the project. There's a lot of building relationship in general. We could, hopefully we do a better job and we can start perhaps reaching out, but for now it was mainly based on us connecting with people and people reaching out to us.
Yeah, and as was mentioned in the presentation on the science, nothing scientifically that we're doing is particularly groundbreaking. Like, the question Maria asked, and we've been able to do this for 30 years, right? So we're just replicating those things. And the science, the wet lab has definitely slowed way down during COVID. But we still have a couple people who are actually working in the lab, Jan in Baltimore, and we have 2 or 3 people working in Oakland. And so, we're working on it. We are now able to produce small amounts of insulin, I think. But that's not the problem. That's not the technical problem. That's not the main problem that we have to solve. I have no doubt that we will figure out how to make the microbes produce the insulin. Even the formulation of insulin is not something that's difficult. It's been known for a long time. So the technical stuff is, I think, the least of our problems. I think getting this crazy idea of a completely different way to make medicines to actually happen is the innovation that we're doing. So yeah.
We do have some groups who are doing things like open source hardware. So a long-term goal of ours, because there are regions we want to partner with that aren't going to be able to easily afford or maintain things like HPLCs, et cetera. So there is like the open source HPL, FPLC project, open source bioreactors, et cetera. But realistically, we have these side projects, we want to get them done, but we also want to do the proof of concept using known pathways while we work on these alternatives as well. And we do have, if Louise wants to mention, we have a group that wants to partner with us that we've been working with, but it's been a slow relationship building, not because they're not interested, but there's a university in Tennessee that has a pharmacy department, and one of the professors there wants his students working on this because he'd love to see some of these pharmacy students learning how to make insulin. But the slow part there is that universities and their IP and getting their permissions. So the interest, it's not that the interest isn't there, it's like figuring out the partnership parts. And whether it would be like having them sign some sort of memo of understanding about IP rights or what that's gonna look like is something we're exploring. And we did just start finalizing the process, or we have finished the process to become an incorporated nonprofit finally. So we're now the not just Open Insulin, we're now the Open Insulin Foundation.
Yeah, so we have been partnering with university. The one you mentioned in Tennessee, what's great is a very small one. So we hope they don't. So what we have been doing is basically they're hiring students, and the students work on some projects of open insulin. In Baltimore, we are in contact with a student group at Johns Hopkins University. So not directly with the university, but with a student group, and they've been very. They actually created their own community lab. I mean, in the university, so they're very cool, and they're very excited about open insulin. So I saw a question on the chat just to address that about a potential cure. So I'm not people with diabetic, but what I heard from T1 people is that they've been promised a cure for as long as people can remember. So, and if this happens, that will be awesome. But one of the few things is, first, I'm not sure this happened in 2022. And even if that happened, probably not everyone will have access to the cure. It will be the same thing that with insulin right now, that will be super expensive. So you will still have in the US a large amount of people, first because, it's like the vaccine, it's not like you can vaccinate everyone on day one, like you need time just because technically it takes time. And then even with that, like it will at least take a few months, and then no, everyone will be able to afford it. So you still need affordable insulin. And even if you solve it in the US or in developed country, you still have a huge amount of the population that don't have access now to insulin. So there's a lot of things to do. And even if like the insulin, everything is solved, then there's other biologics. Like once you know how to produce a protein, you can go to other biologics. And then, there's a lot of things that people can do. And if we need to retire, we'll be happy to do so and to work on, on something else or gardening or anything else. But I don't think it's happening.
I think we would all be delighted to not need to do this project. Like if a cure comes along, like none of us are going to be sad about that. But the question about funding more generally, I don't think there is actually a terrible lot of research being done on insulin as a drug anymore, which is part of the problem. Like the big companies are happy to take all their money and not innovate too much. So I don't think it's really impacting it at all.
Yeah, we have about 3 minutes left, so I'm going to ask, we could either take one more question or I'll get like 30-second thoughts from Jess, Lance, Louise, and Nicole as to what takeaway do you wish people who want to build global coalitions could get. Jessica, so we'll give you about 30 seconds.
When I joined the project, I actually didn't think we were ever going to get to market, I have to admit. And over the past couple months that I've really, really changed that. I think we are going to be able to make this. And I think that insulin is a great first test. And so it's probably the easiest one we could have picked. But I think once we get that proven, then we can move on to other drugs. And I think it's super important to involve your stakeholders. I was in a meeting and out of the 9 people there, 6 people were people living with diabetes. And so it's super important to involve the people who you're actually impacting, to listen to them and hear what they want, not just what I think they want. So.
Yes. All right, Lance, same question.
Yeah, first to echo what Jess said, I think basically as a result of COVID and the shutdown and the refocus from lab work to regulatory and business work, Open Insulin has, over the past half year, meaningfully changed from more of like, a community project to an actual very viable approach that is pioneering a novel business model and that we can very credibly say has a potential both to reach market and to change the way that we think about manufacturing medicines. And on that latter point, as I mentioned earlier, the current approach that we have to producing pharmaceuticals and compounds is well tailored for one type of specific, drug, but isn't well tailored for either drugs for orphan diseases where it's millions of dollars per dose, or isn't well tailored for drugs like insulin, where the cost of manufacturing is low, there's no R&D, and the price should be low, but because of monopolistic forces, it isn't. And so at least in that second category of drugs, we're looking to really disrupt the current production approach and introduce a new business model that can be applied not just for insulin, but for many other compounds that we've discussed. And on that end, we would love to partner with anyone on this call to either for insulin production or to help advise for other areas of entry as well.
All right, we're over time, but Nicole, I will let you give a quick, short thought, and then Louise, short thought.
Okay, I will be quick. I think I will just reiterate a couple things that Lance and Jessica said, right? Like this new novel business model is kind of the important thing here. And I think that will really, in terms of global collaborations, that will really shift with context and with geographical location and need, and just kind of reiterating the need to involve the people who use insulin, the people who will produce insulin, like any kind of workers, and then people from the local geographical community, and really thinking about local needs is going to be really important. So that's it.
All right, Louise, wrap us up, and then we're going to call this one.
Yeah, something to take on. Don't believe people that say that the problem is too complex or too complicated. You can do it. Just get a group of people, start working on it. Don't bother if you don't have the background or if you don't really know what to do. Just make sure you think about your stakeholders. Who should be there? Who should be talking about this, all that there, and then everything will be right, and people will join and we'll work with you along the way.
Yeah. And I think we're going to wrap it up there. I think, centering your project around values, around people, community, ethics, strong pull there for the ethics of what are you doing? Are you involving your stakeholders? Are you doing this project to promote yourself? Or are you doing this project to really solve a problem? I'm not saying there's something wrong with promoting yourself. Just think about why you're doing something and what's happening. So thank you for our semi-impromptu put together panel who came together because Anthony couldn't make it. So thank you to Jessica, Lance, Louise, and Nicole. Some of my favorite people, I love spending time with them on Open Insulin. Go open source medicine and taking down the pharma industry, or at least challenging it with an alternative model. So spread the word, join the team, think about where you can disrupt industries. Don't be afraid of problems too big. Just get started, find a group of people, and give it a try. And don't think you have to know anything about it, but don't go ahead and give it a try.